Stop wasting my time with this garbage! Julian Vance's voice ripped through the quiet morning air of Rosie's diner, sharp and ugly. He slammed his fist onto the worn laminate countertop, rattling the sugar packets and making the ceramic coffee mug jump. A small splash of lukewarm coffee sloshed over the rim. He thought Elsie, the elderly waitress, whose hands were now trembling, was just another tired old lady, easily dismissed. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly imagine, was the quiet strength she held, the resilience that would very soon challenge his pampered world. Today's story is about that monumental mistake. Elsie Miller had seen a lot of mornings in her 73 years, most of them starting at 5 a.m. behind the counter of Rosie's diner. Her back ached, her feet throbbed from years of shuffling between tables, and sometimes her hands would shake just a little when she poured coffee. But even with the aches and pains, a gentle warmth radiated from her. Every morning, she'd greet the regulars by name, remembering their usual orders, their families, even their worries. Just yesterday, she'd noticed little Timmy Harris staring longingly at the display of cinnamon buns. His mom had been laid off and couldn't afford treats. Elsie, without a word, had simply slipped a warm bun onto his plate, pretending it was a new sample they were giving out. The boy's wide-eyed grin had been worth more than any tip. She just believed in kindness, even when life wasn't kind back. Julian Vance, however, clearly didn't believe in kindness. He swaggered into Rosie's that morning like he owned the place, his designer sunglasses perched on his head, his expensive watch catching the light. He was known around town not for any accomplishment of his own, but for being the son of the city's wealthiest real estate mogul, Richard Vance. He ordered a breakfast plate, then spent 20 minutes on his phone, oblivious to Elsie's quiet, efficient movements. When Elsie finally brought his food, a simple plate of eggs and bacon, he barely looked up. "Is this supposed to be edible?" he sneered, pushing the plate back with a single finger. "The eggs are rubber, and this bacon looks like it died of old age." Elsie's smile faltered. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Let me take that back for you right away. I can get the kitchen to make a fresh batch." Her voice was soft, apologetic. She reached for the plate, her fingers brushing the ceramic. Julian pulled it back sharply. "Don't bother," he scoffed, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. He leaned in, his eyes narrowed. "You know, for someone who's been doing this for 1,000 years, you'd think you'd learn how to serve a decent meal. Or maybe your senses are just failing you." He chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. Then, with a sudden, disgusting movement, he gathered a small amount of saliva in his mouth and spat directly onto the eggs. "There," he said, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. "Now it's properly seasoned." Elsie froze. Her hand, which had been reaching for the plate, dropped to her side as if struck. Her breath hitched in her throat. Her face, usually so warm and creased with gentle smiles, drained of all color, leaving her pale and fragile. A tremor ran through her body, starting in her hands and shaking her shoulders. She wanted to speak, to yell, but no sound came out. Her chest felt tight, her vision blurring as a hot sting pricked behind her eyes. All she could do was stand there, the horrible wet sound of his spit still echoing in her ears. Julian's friends, two equally smug young men sitting at a nearby booth, snickered, their eyes darting from Elsie to Julian, clearly enjoying the spectacle. One of them pulled out his phone, pretending to text, but his camera was clearly pointed at Elsie. "Lighten up, old-timer," Julian called out, loud enough for half the diner to hear. "It's just a joke. Don't look like someone just stole your bingo money." A few other diners, mostly older folks, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, casting quick, sympathetic glances at Elsie, but no one dared to intervene. One man, a burly truck driver, started to rise, his face flushed with anger, but a sharp, almost imperceptible shake of the head from his wife, coupled with a pointed glance at Julian's smirking friends filming, kept him in his seat. The unspoken threat of the Vance name hung heavy in the air. Elsie felt every eye on her, every silent judgment, every stifled whisper. Her cheeks burned with a shame that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with the cruel boy in front of her. She felt small, utterly helpless, and utterly alone. A single tear, hot and heavy, finally broke free and tracked a path down her wrinkled cheek. Just then, a deep rumble vibrated through the diner, starting in the floorboards and rising to fill the air. It wasn't the usual street noise. This was a low, throbbing growl, growing steadily louder. Conversation died. Heads turned towards the street-facing windows. The rumble became a roar, then a chorus of thunder, as if a storm had just rolled in. 8 massive motorcycles, chromed and gleaming, pulled up directly in front of Rosie's, their engines idling with a powerful, guttural thrum. 8 men, all clad in black leather vests emblazoned with fierce, winged skulls and iron vengeance patches, dismounted with a practiced, almost synchronized ease. They were huge, muscled, and moved with an undeniable, quiet authority. The bell above the diner door jingled softly as the first man stepped inside, then the second, and so on, until all 8 of them filled the entrance, blocking out the morning sun. The air in Rosie's diner, moments ago filled with Julian's snickers and Elsie's silent despair, now crackled with an entirely new, unreadable tension. Julian, still basking in his petty victory, glanced over, a dismissive sneer on his face. "Oh, great," he mumbled loud enough to be heard. "Looks like the circus is in town. Can't they take their little biker gang to a dive bar?" The biggest of the bikers, a man with a thick beard and eyes that seemed to miss nothing, slowly turned his head. His gaze swept over Julian, then locked onto Elsie, who was still standing by Julian's table, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. The biker's brow furrowed, a flicker of something raw and dangerous crossing his face. He took a slow, deliberate step, then another, moving towards Elsie. The other 7 bikers fanned out slightly, their eyes scanning the room, their presence a palpable force. The lead biker stopped in front of Elsie, his massive frame dwarfing her. He gently, almost tenderly, took her trembling hand. "Mom?" His voice, though deep, was surprisingly soft, filled with concern. What happened here? Julian Vance's jaw went slack. The smug smirk evaporated from his face like mist in the sun. His eyes, wide and disbelieving, darted from Elsie's tear-streaked face to the massive, leather-clad man holding her hand, and then to the 7 other hulking figures now watching him with chilling intensity. "Mom?" he stammered, the word catching in his throat. His face, moments ago flushed with arrogant amusement, was now a sickly shade of white. The biker, Duke, Elsie's eldest son, turned his head slowly, his gaze, which had been soft for his mother, hardened into an icy stare as it landed on Julian. "You heard her," Duke said, his voice a low growl that vibrated with suppressed menace. "Now, I asked my mother a question. What happened here?" Julian swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Nothing. Look, it was just a misunderstanding. She's old. She probably got confused. I was just kidding around, you know? Just a little joke." He tried to laugh, but it came out as a weak, strangled cough. His eyes flickered nervously to his friends, who were now shrinking in their booth, suddenly very interested in the patterns on the table. Elsie, her hand still held gently by Duke, finally found her voice, though it trembled with a mix of fear and indignation. He spit on my plate, Duke, right on the food, and then he said I was old and my senses were failing." Her voice cracked on the last word, and a fresh wave of tears welled up. Duke's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching so hard that a muscle twitched in his cheek. He let go of Elsie's hand and stepped closer to Julian, who involuntarily recoiled. "Is that true?" Duke's voice was barely a whisper, yet it filled the entire diner, chilling everyone to the bone. "You spit on my mother? You humiliated her in front of everyone?" Julian's bravado completely deserted him. He stammered, "No, I didn't mean to. It was just a bit of a dramatic gesture for the bad food. My father, Richard Vance, he wouldn't stand for this kind of service, you know? This place is a dump. I was just making a point." He tried to stand taller, to invoke his father's name as a shield, but his voice was shaking uncontrollably. "A point?" Another biker, a burly man named Bear, stepped forward, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can just walk in here, disrespect a woman who works harder than you've ever imagined, and then spit on her food just to make a point?" He took another step, and Julian stumbled backward, bumping into his chair. "Look, I'm sorry, okay?" Julian pleaded, his voice high-pitched now, sweat beaded on his forehead, glistening under the diner lights. "I didn't know she was your mother. I really am sorry." His eyes darted around, looking for an escape, for help, but his friends were now actively avoiding eye contact, one of them even slipping out the door. Duke leaned in close, his shadow falling over Julian. "Sorry?" he scoffed. "You don't get to just be sorry after you treat people like dirt. My mother has worked her entire life, raising 8 sons, putting food on our table with her own 2 hands. And you, a spoiled brat, think you can walk in here and just spit on her?" Duke's fist trembled, but he held it by his side, his control terrifyingly absolute. "You spit on her kindness? You spit on her dignity." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "Now, you're going to clean that up." Julian stared, aghast. "Clean what up? The spit?" He looked at the offending plate, then back at Duke, terror dawning in his eyes. "Every last drop," Duke affirmed, his voice deadly calm. "And then you're going to apologize. Not just to her, but to every single person in this diner who had to witness your pathetic display." Julian's face crumpled. He was about to protest when a new, sharper voice cut through the tension. "Julian, what in God's name is going on here?" A man in a sharp suit, carrying a sleek briefcase, rushed through the door, his face a mask of furious concern. He was Julian's father's personal assistant, a man named Mr. Finch, who had clearly been alerted by one of Julian's cowardly friends. Finch took in the scene. Julian, pale and trembling, surrounded by 8 intimidating bikers, and Elsie standing bravely beside Duke. His eyes widened as he put 2 and 2 together. "Mr. Finch," Julian cried, relief flooding his voice. These hooligans are threatening me." Finch, however, wasn't looking at the bikers. He was looking at Elsie, then at Duke. His face, usually composed, now showed a flicker of genuine shock. "Elsie?" he whispered, recognizing her from years of quick coffee stops. He knew her for her kindness. He also knew of Duke. Finch cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Julian, what did you do?" he demanded, his voice dropping to a stern, serious tone. Duke stepped forward, calmly placing a hand on Finch's shoulder. "Your boss's son," he said, his eyes never leaving Julian, "just spat on my mother, and publicly shamed her for doing her job." Finch's face went even paler than Julian's. He had seen enough of Richard Vance's wrath to know the implications of this. He quickly pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the keypad. "Mr. Vance," he spoke into the phone, his voice tight. "It's Finch. We have a significant incident at Rosie's. Julian has crossed a line. It involves Elsie Miller and her sons." He listened for a moment, his eyes widening further. "Yes, sir. Immediately, sir." He hung up, looking utterly defeated. He turned to Julian, his usual subservience replaced by a cold fury. "Your father is on his way, and he's not happy. Not happy at all." Julian's knees felt weak. He knew his father's "not happy" meant an entire world of consequences. He looked at the spit on the plate, then at the unwavering gaze of Duke, then at his mother, Elsie, who now stood tall, her head held high. The reality of his actions and the sheer power of the family he had insulted crashed down on him. He felt the eyes of every diner patron, not just judging him, but condemning him. The humiliation was total, absolute, and utterly public. His world, built on arrogance and privilege, was crumbling around him, one sneer at a time. A few minutes later, a sleek black car screeched to a halt outside Rosie's. Richard Vance, Julian's father, a man whose presence usually commanded respect, stormed in, his face a thundercloud. He took one look at his trembling son, then at Elsie, then at the 8 unmoving, formidable men surrounding them. Mr. Finch quickly explained the situation in hushed, urgent tones. Richard Vance, a man who built his empire on shrewd calculations, quickly assessed the scene, his son, pale and cornered, the formidable bikers, radiating quiet menace, and Elsie, a woman whose unblemished reputation in the community was well known. The potential damage to his family's name, both from Julian's actions and any confrontation with these men, was clear. Richard Vance's gaze, usually so sharp and calculating, softened for a fleeting moment as he looked at Elsie, then hardened into a furious glare as he turned to Julian. "You," he bit out, his voice low and dangerous, "you absolute imbecile. You think the world owes you everything, don't you? You think you can treat people like dirt and there are no consequences?" Julian opened his mouth, but no words came. His father rarely raised his voice, but the sheer disappointment and cold rage in his eyes were far worse than any shout. "Elsie," Richard Vance said, turning to the waitress, his voice surprisingly gentle, "I am profoundly sorry for my son's behavior. It is inexcusable." He then looked at Duke. "And to you, sir, and your brothers, I apologize on behalf of my family. Julian will face the consequences, I assure you." He then turned back to his son, his eyes blazing. "You will clean that plate, every speck, and then you will look Elsie in the eye and give her a sincere apology, not just for the spit, but for every ounce of disrespect you showed her. And after that, you are coming with me. Your credit cards? Gone. Your car? Gone. Your allowance? Gone. You will be working at one of my construction sites at minimum wage starting Monday, and if I hear one word of complaint or one hint of your previous attitude, it will be worse." Julian looked like he'd been hit by a truck. His face, already pale, turned a sickly shade of green. His mouth opened and closed silently. He stared at his father, then at Duke, then at the plate. Slowly, with trembling hands, he picked up a napkin. He painstakingly, disgustingly, wiped up the spit from the plate, his face a mask of utter humiliation. When he was done, he turned to Elsie. His eyes, usually filled with disdain, now held a raw, pathetic shame. "Elsie," he stammered, his voice barely audible, I am truly sorry. For everything. For what I said. For what I did. I was wrong." He couldn't meet her eyes. Elsie looked at him, then at Duke, a flicker of weary understanding, perhaps even a hint of pity crossing her face. She just nodded slowly, a quiet dignity settling over her, a testament to a life lived with grace despite hardship. Richard Vance put a hand on Julian's shoulder, not in comfort, but in firm guidance, and steered him out of the diner. The silence in Rosie's was absolute, broken only by the soft jingle of the bell as they exited. Julian's friends were long gone. Duke turned back to Elsie, his strong hand gently rubbing her arm. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, his voice softening once more. Elsie took a deep breath, her shoulders relaxing. A faint, gentle smile touched her lips. "I'm okay, son. I'm okay." She looked around the diner, at the other patrons, who were now starting to whisper, their faces showing a mix of shock and relief. She picked up her order pad, a new strength in her movements. "Now," she said, her voice clear, "who needs more coffee?" Duke watched her, a proud, protective glint in his eyes. He exchanged a knowing glance with his brothers, who subtly positioned themselves near the entrance, ensuring no one else would dare cause trouble for their mother. Elsie, with renewed resolve in her step, began to refill coffee cups, her calm demeanor once again bringing warmth to Rosie's diner, now protected by a silent, formidable guard. Stories like this remind us that true strength often lies where you least expect it, and that kindness, though sometimes tested, always finds its champions. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales that reveal the hidden depths of everyday life. What do you think Julian Vance learned that day? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.